Hello, my wonderfully drowsy time travelers, my fellow lovers of slow-moving history and stories that melt your mind into dream. Before we begin our journey to the distant past, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If these sleepy stories help you drift off, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us create more content to lull restless minds to sleep. And if you're feeling extra cozy, leave us a comment. Tell us how long you lasted before dozing off. We love reading your experiences. Now, find your most comfortable position. Let your eyelids grow heavy and allow my voice to guide you into relaxation. Smoke still trembles above Constantinople's hills, trailing from blackened beams where a sanctuary once stood. In that hush, after riot storms, an emperor gazes into embers and gives his heart a single command. Raise wisdom again, vaster, brighter, shaped from stone and light. What form can a mystery take when cast into masonry? The question drifts through frosty dawn, begging for geometry. Within weeks, two scholars step on to the scarred ground. Anthemius, who once played with burning mirrors, and Isidore, whose chalkboards overflowed with circles inside circles, unfold wax tablets and sketch soaring arcs. Their styluses scratch like quills in scripture. A square rooted in earth, a circle flowering toward heaven, joined by unheard of curving triangles. Workers glance at the drawings and feel something stir, an intimation that numbers themselves can pray. Orders ripple across the empire. Timber rafts slide down forest rivers, barges heavy with marble nose through the Golden Horn. Brickyards glow all night under violet sparks. 10,000 hands move as if one pulse, hoisting ropes, chanting unrecorded songs that keep hammer strikes in time with the heartbeat of the city. 5 fleeting years. They have been told 5 years to fashion a temple so audacious that even ruin will hesitate. Foundations dive deep, chasing bedrock beneath unstable soil. Trenches gulp rubble, lime, and timber beams that lie hidden like secret ribs. Above, 4 colossal piers rise, towering, patient. Between them, curving pendentives unfurl the daring triangles that will teach a square to cradle a dome. Stonecutters set each block with a kiss of mortar mixed from fire-burned lime, volcanic ash, and pulverized brick. The blend cures almost like breathing. Masons say you can feel it exhale on damp mornings. Columns arrive like trophies from conquered myths. Porphyry rumored to have shaded pharaonic courts. Green Thessalian pillars vined as if with frozen rivers. Purple-flecked marble plundered from the fallen temple of Artemis. Around the site, whispers spread this basilica will not merely host relics. It will become one, a reliquary of the empire's memories fused into a single, luminous corpus. Brick by brick, the dome ascends, lighter than logic. 40 windows ring its base, slicing daylight into slender blades that dissolve stone's heaviness. When the last brick locks into place, onlookers swear the vault rests on air, suspended by invisible chains of gold. At night, oil lamps flicker along scaffolds, casting spinning halos onto the fresh mortar. Artisans watch and imagine constellations blooming indoors. Winter turns, then summer, until a cold December morning of the 6th year witnesses a new consecration. Candles line the nave like a river of amber stars. The emperor steps beneath the dome, shoulders squared with triumph that trembles into awe. Voices rise, incense spirals, and sunlight pierces the clerestory in a single radiant spear, crowning the altar in white fire. Some swear in that moment the stones hung, as though remembering every hand that touched them. Step a little closer to the marble floor. Its patterns swirl like cosmic maps, guiding restless minds toward stillness. Stroll the nave and the aisles, breathe around you, each arch a rib, each aisle a lung. The building is alive. Not a monument, but a body of wisdom, one that learned to stand only by accepting the scars beneath its polished skin. Pause beneath the glittering vault. Imagine geometry becoming devotion, proportion tuning emotion, light turning theology into sensation. In that hush, you might sense echoing parallels, Egyptian mysteries, where temples mirrored the sky, Platonic lectures where circles awakened intellect, Hebrew visions of palaces layered in a set. Here, all merge without shouting, a secret concord sung in mortar and singing glass. And yet the lesson is not grandeur alone. Stone-like spirit must bend or break. Quakes will come, lofty curves will crack, mosaics will hide under plaster, songs will change tongues. Each fracture will call forth new ingenuity, new caretakers who read the fissures like runes and answer with reinforcement, buttress, or prayer. Hagia Sophia thus becomes testament to resilience, a phoenix of masonry rising again and again from its own quickened ash. Perhaps that is the gift it offers us tonight. When inner sanctuaries collapse, we too rebuild, maybe taller, maybe with gentler curves that remember pain. If you feel kindred wonder at such layered metamorphosis, you're warmly invited to walk these corridors with us again. Morning will come. Frost will glisten on marble steps, and a single shaft of dawn will thread through the highest arch, catching dust motes that drift like miniature worlds in a quiet golden sea. Hairline lines whispered across the dome before anyone dared call them wounds. One morning in 558, the curved side loosened, and a rain of brick and dust opened the nave to raw sky. For a heartbeat, the great house breathed without a roof, and the city felt its own chest tight. Summons rode out again, this time for Isidore's nephew, a younger mind with old plans in his blood. He didn't simply copy what fell. He lifted the drum higher, sharpened the dome's profile, threaded new ribs through the shell like steel through silk. The result caught light differently, less like a bowl, more like an upturned, taut sail. Repair here was not erasure, but metamorphosis. Poetry hurried to meet stone. Paul the Silentiary's verses unfurled like brocade, praising bronze doors, silver railings. The waylight cascaded from the crown like a circlet of suns. Words became a second scaffolding, an invisible architecture arching over the audible one. Chant met chisel, meter met mortar. Earth refused to sleep. Tremors in later centuries cracked semi-domes, jarred mosaics, made arches groan. Armenian hands, under Tradat's guidance, patched the wounds. Ottomans later cinched the belly with buttresses, iron chains, drainage secrets. Every intervention felt like a new layer of armor on a veteran soldier who refused to leave the field. Plunder came not as tremor, but as trumpets. Crusader steel sliced into icons in 12-4. Chalices melted. Relics vanished into foreign reliquaries. The case stayed metallic for years. Yet, even in desolation, the central space held an uncanny poise, as if the emptiness itself had become a relic, an absence humming with memory. Conquest shifted the compass. In 1453, prostrations turned toward Mecca. Carpets softened echoes. A mihrab opened like a door in the apse. Calligraphy rose where saints once gazed. The names of Allah and the Prophet flowing in ink that gleamed like oil on water. Voice changed language. Longing stayed. The dome received Arabic syllables without a wince, letting them spiral upward like incense once did. Sinan approached like a physician scholar, stethoscope in mind, calipers in hand. He ringed the patient with stone braces, cinched her ribs with iron, taught rain to flee discreetly. Strength in his design, wore plain clothes, massive blocks, blunt angles, yet the interior floated freer because of it. The paradox held. Restraint guarded rapture. Never truly died. Many only slept. Beneath plaster skins, seraphim waited. 19th century restorers lifted chalk and lime to reveal eyes blinking in renewed light. Imagine the first brushstroke that found a buried feather. A hush would have followed. The kind that feels like a candle being lit in a cavern. Sound, too, evolved. A taller dome stretched reverberation. Carpets drank certain frequencies. Hanging lamps threw shadows that nudged waves of voice into new eddies. Stand under the center now and hum a single note. You'll feel it come back. Elongated, draped in velvet, as if the building itself were answering in a deeper octave. Modernity knocked at the doors with clipboards and decrees. Museum status stripped altars of function, yet gave scholars a pulpit. Visitors shuffled through like pilgrims of curiosity, cameras replacing prayer ropes, labels whispering what liturgies once declared. Glass cases glimmered. Silence thickened, of a different sort. Then, in our own decade, the pendulum swung again. Prayers returned 5 times a day, and debates flared like torches on distant screens. Through it all, the stones kept their patient counsel. They have hosted hymns and takbirs, laments and lectures. They will likely host more unscripted music yet. These living layers, the collapses, reinventions, quiet survivals speak to you. You're welcome to linger with us, to keep tracing light through arches and meaning through mortar. Support, even in a whisper, is a kind of scaffolding we build together. Step back for a final glance tonight. Buttresses brood in twilight. Chains hold their silent tension. Mosaics dream under veils. Inside, a late prayer fades. Outside, gulls wheel above the Bosphorus. White flickers against deepening blue. Somewhere in the upper masonry, a faint crack ticks in the cool, settling air then stills. The vast shell exhales, and darkness folds softly over a wisdom too wide for any single creed. Midnight crouches over the great shell, and somewhere in the upper galleries, a guard's footsteps tap like a metronome for memory. Centuries lean on the balustrades here. Candle once guttered beside a monk's psalter. Later, an oil lamp swung as a muezzin tested his voice. Now, a smartphone screen flickers blue against marble that has already seen comets and coronations. What else can a building become when it has already been almost everything? A question steals in with the draft. How many eyes have carried away a fragment of this place as if it were a page? And how many times has that page been rewritten by the next pair of eyes? Travelers began scribbling early. In the 14th century, Russian pilgrims listed relics as carefully as merchants tally weight. Their notes crowded with awe and practical detail. Ibn Battuta, drifting through Constantinople's bustle, recorded the vast congregation beneath a roof that seemed to float. Evliya Çelebi later composed whole paragraphs on how sound ricocheted from the vaults like beads scattered on a silver tray. These voices of polyglot chorus wove their own minor domes of description. Over the stone one, 19th century Europe arrived with sketchbooks and measuring rods. The Fossati brothers Gaspar and Giuseppe spent 2 restoration-drenched years, 1847, 1849, peeling plaster from mosaics, repainting war arabesques, and cataloguing every capital and cornice. Their lithographs became a portable Hagia, Sophia, for salons in Paris and St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, Gustave Flaubert jotted in his travel notebook that the interior resembles a gigantic beehive of light, his ink still bright enough to hum off the page. Each account moves the needle, from relic lists to poetic similes, from devotion to documentation. A shift that feels like a change in incense, from thick, resinous smoke to the crisp smell of new paper. The museum decree of 1935 pressed a stamp of modernity onto ancient life. Glass cases glinted, ropes defined where reverence should stop. Labels typed in bureaucratic fonts did the explaining. Yet even under fluorescent tubes, the old radiance found ways to seep through mosaics, blinking after centuries of sleep. Marble veins catching afternoon sun like little rivers. School children filed past, sticky-fingered and impatient, while conservators in white coats whispered to seraphim sinking back under life. Reverence didn't vanish. It merely altered its wardrobe. Digital eyes came next. Laser scanners traced every ripple of brick, every minute crack creeping along an arch. Stanford engineers released a recording of a single note sung under the dome, stretched into a shimmering 11-second halo proof that sound here is a tangible architecture of air. Photogrammetry stitched millions of pixels into a navigable cloud, letting scholars walk the galleries from laptops in dim apartments at 3 a.m. Light, once sacred fire, then stained glass. Then oil lamp now traveled as packets and code, an invisible liturgy of photons. Yet the building itself stayed bodily, mortar smelling faintly of dust after rain, wood swelling and shrinking with seasons, pigeons contributing guano to conservation problems. The tension between sacredness and maintenance continued. A temple that needs mops and insurance forms. A monument that requires calibration, screws, and earthquake sensors. When the 1999 tremors rattled. Istanbul, structural engineers fed the dome's data into models, predicting how the next big wave might travel up the piers and flutter the pendentives. Survival became an algorithm as well as a prayer. Light, meanwhile, kept speaking in tongues. Once it spelled Christ Pantocrator in Tesserae. Later, it gilded Arabic calligraphy panels the size of sails. At sunrise, magenta washes the semi-domes. Noon flattens details into glare. Dusk turns the marble floors into pools of indigo where chandeliers drip gold. Each hour carries a theology in hue. Imagine a seeker sitting quietly by a column, charting inner weather against these shifts. Calm in the lemony morning, inquiry in the white noon, surrender in the violet fall of evening. Comparisons extend the vault. Stand beneath Chartres' blue roses, and you sense a vertical yearning. Wander Borobuder's terraces, and you climb a stone mandala. Hagia Sophia nudges both up and around, a spiral of processions. A surge into the dome, the platonic ascent from shadow to form, whispers through curves. Hermetic symmetry murmurs as above, so below in marble reflections. Early Haikalot visions of palatial heavens echo in its layered galleries. None cancels the others. All hover like translucent veils, overlapping without smothering. Applied inward, the blueprint becomes intimate. A personal foundation must be stabilized habits like hidden timbers distributing weight. 4 inner piers could be courage, patience, clarity, and kindness, shouldering whatever dome your life dares to lift. The pendentives might be disciplines that feel awkward until they suddenly make impossible balance natural. A ring of windows at the mines crown 40 quiet breaths. Each dawn lets illumination pour in until thought loses its heaviness. And somewhere within, an altar waits for a relic only you can seal there. A vow, quiet as mortar setting, the building learned to accept veiling as well as unveiling. Icons slept behind plaster, but their memory leaked through rumor and faint ridges. Calligraphy panels hung, then came down, then rose again. The floor absorbed feet aligned toward Jerusalem, then toward Mecca, then in no particular line at all. Perhaps sanctity isn't a fixed direction, but a quality of attention. A way of standing under a dome and letting its curve recalibrate your interior compass. In July 2020, the ritual axis swung once more. Prayer rugs unfurled, shoes gathered at thresholds. Microphones carried verses through spaces that had known chants in Greek, Slavonic, Ottoman, Turkish. Outside, arguments roared on screens. Inside, voices lowered into recitation. Stone, indifferent yet utterly hospitable, held both storm and whisper with equal poise. It has done so since Justinian's vow, and likely will continue after ours are forgotten. A soft invitation before we close these pages tonight. If this weaving of scaffolds and symbols, of earthquakes and quiet light, nourishes the hidden architect in you, you're welcome to stay with us, subscribe, comment, or every gesture, even silent, is another rib beneath this dome of inquiry. Now, dim the lamps. Caretaker slides a key. A faint clink echoes into the vastness. Outside, the Bosphorus exhales mist. Inside, darkness loosens the edges of columns until they seem to float somewhere high above, between brick and star. A single photon ricochets off a gold tessera that no eye will see tonight, yet it glows, unobserved, like a secret prayer that refuses to go out. Down in a windowless workshop beneath the south aisle, a conservator warms a resin until it loosens like honey. Tiny squares of glass, each with a whisper of gold leaf, trapped inside weight on felt. One by one, she coaxes them back into a mosaic field where a saint's robe once shimmered. The gesture is almost devotional. Breath held, tweezers steady, heartbeat sensing with a rhythm older than her name. Glassmakers of late antiquity floated gold between two wafers of clear silica, then fired the sandwich until light lived inside it. Venetian furnaces later refined the trick, yet Hagia Sophia's tesserae carry a distinct Byzantine roughness, pitted surfaces that scatter, not mirror, radiance. When morning sun reaches them at a slant, the effect is less glare and more pollen. Luminous dust drifting across stone skin. You can stand 20 meters away and still feel your eyes dilate. Marble speaks too, though in veined syllables. Proconnesian slabs, quarried from the Marmara archipelago, show feathery grays. The Salian greens swirl like submerged forests. Phrygian purples pulse with imperial undertow. Polishing wasn't mere shine. Artisans rubbed until water beaded without soaking, a practical magic that kept damp from creeping into the nave. Somewhere inside those swirls, an ancient shore glints. Shells compressed to limestone, fossil memory supporting liturgy. Names cling to the building's body if you know where to look. Brick stamps record imperial regnal years. Masons scratched monograms into hidden joints. A faint olago hole, beautiful hides behind a cornice, perhaps a private verdict from a satisfied hand. Centuries later, Ottoman calligraphers left bold roundels on chains, each panel heavier than a team of men could lift. Scripts overlap like palimpsest, Huns Greek, Arabic, Latin letters, evolving as vines between stones in a forgotten courtyard. engineering persists in twilight hours. Accelerometers pinned to piers feed silent data streams. Seismic retrofits are sketched on tablets glowing cool blue in an office where incense never burned. After the 1999 Izmit quake, algorithms mapped how shockwaves might ripple through the dome, predicting stress blooms like thunderheads on a radar screen. Decision makers then threaded steel cables through masonry corridors no pilgrim will ever see. Chains again, but now spun for metallurgy and math. Air itself is curated in Byzantium. Winter services meant brazier heat rising to the clerestory, smoke testing the dome's vents. Ottoman caretakers later hung hundreds of oil lamps in symmetrical constellations, their heat gently stirring drafts that kept condensation from settling on mosaics. Today, climate control hums invisibly, maintaining humidity, ranges that keep lime mortar from sighing too deeply. Sacred breath has become measured airflow. The temple inhales through ducts. Listen closely at different spots and you'll hear varied timbres. Beneath the central oculus, the reverberation lingers like poured cream. Under a side gallery, echoes snap back faster, bright as copper. Modern acousticians, curious as monks, captured these signatures and re-synthesized ancient chants to hear how a 9th century choir might have sounded. The result is uncanny. Voices blossom around you, then fade like ripples meeting the shore of silence. Walk the upper galleries, and a different story unrolls. Worn grooves on balustrades mark where generations leaned, elbows polishing stone, while eyes traced ceremonies below. A faded charcoal cross still shadows a column, likely drawn by a pilgrim requesting protection for a voyage home. Nearby, faint scratchings in Arabic. Script invoke mercy. Across time, the same plea, different tongue, etched into mineral patience. Outside, minarets spear the sky. Sinan's answer to weight and wind. He calculated their taper, so lightning would kiss them first, sparing the dome. Copper finials grounded the strike into earth. Down at street level, rain channels he carved, whisked torrents away before they could seep. A hydraulic theology of prevention. Each storm becomes a test he passed in advance. A more intimate economy thrummed during construction. Wages paid in copper falls, wine rations issued for night work, bread ovens set near scaffolds so laborers could eat hot. Some days the site must have smelled of mortar steam, sweat, figs, and cedar shavings. Empires are often narrated by emperors. Yet here, 10,000 anonymous bodies fused intention into load-bearing reality. Their names evaporated. Their fingerprints harden in joints no one will ever open. Sophia, the wisdom, for whom all this mass was summoned, slips in and out of doctrines. Church fathers argued whether she was Christ, the Spirit, or an attribute beyond personhood. Mystics felt her as a fragrance settling on thought. Russian iconographers painted her as a crimson-winged. Inside the basilica, she is less argued than enacted. Light learning to hover. Sound learning to circle. Stone learning to float. Experiencing her might mean simply standing still, until proportion hushes your inner chatter. Transposition continues abroad. Diaspora communities paint mini Hagia Sophias in parish basements from Chicago to Melbourne, domes translated into cubic drywall and lead strips. Meanwhile, digital pilgrims in VR headsets pace through pixelated aisles at 2 in the morning, muting roommates and unmuting centuries. The aura is different, but not absent presence, it seems, can travel by wire and remain strangely warm. An inward blueprint sketches itself, unbidden. Perhaps your foundations are stories you rarely tell, yet they bear every new weight. Maybe 4 virtues hold your dome: patience, discernment, steadiness, wonder. Practices can be your pendentives, awkward until they belong journaling, fasting, study, service curving the square of daily habit into a circle of meaning. 40 breaths at dawn become your clerestory. A single act sealed in silence becomes your altar's relic. No decree needed, only repetition. We're nearing another threshold. Its layered passages keep you company, if marble veins and data streams, seraphim eyes and seismic graphs, all feel like one long, breathing sentence. You're gently invited to remain with us. Quiet support lets this exploration keep its poise, like a hidden buttress under a daring arch. Night settles again. The last visitor's footsteps fade on cool stone. Outside, the Bosphorus trades silver for ink. Inside, emergency LEDs glow faint green, tracing exits no mystic ever drew on parchment. High above, the gold in a tessera catches a stray photon from a distant street lamp, answering with a pulse too small to register, yet still, unmistakably, light. A thin thread of midnight rain taps the lead sheets above, trickling toward gutters, Sinan calculated centuries ago. Inside, humidity sensors blink their quiet verdicts acceptable for now. The building dozes, yet adjustments never cease. Vigilance has become a sacrament here, performed with laptops instead of incense. When UNESCO inscribed the historic areas of Istanbul in 1985, the Basilicanal Mosque entered a new covenant. Global stewardship. Conservators now speak the language of microclimates and salt crystallization, diagnosing flaking plaster with the same concern monks once reserved for wavering faith. After the 1999 quake, engineers modeled shock paths through piers and semidomes, discovering stress knots hiding like dormant serpents. Steel cables were threaded through walls no pilgrim ever touches. They hum under tension, inaudible but essential, like a mantra whispered beneath the roar of daily news. Elsewhere, the Fossati brothers' 19th century notebooks rest in archives. Edges browned, sketches precise enough that a cornice's dent can be matched to their graphite lie. Thomas Whitemore's Byzantine Institute photographs capture seraphim emerging from plaster like divers surfacing, eyes still wet with centuries of lime. Paul the Silentiary's 6th F century A.K. Phrasis lies open in another scholar's hands, its hexameters beating time with bronze doors that still swing. Different eras keep different ledgers. Together they form a choir of ink that brackets the building in annotation, orientation, and keeps shifting. The mihrab, angled slightly to align with Mecca, sits askew from the apsis, original axis, two compasses superimposed, two norths negotiated. Prayer rugs draw longitudinal lines. Earlier processions traced transverse loops. If you climb to the south gallery, you can feel the subtle misalignment in your spine. Turn left for Jerusalem, pivot right for Mecca, or simply stand still and let both vectors pass through you like intersecting beams. So your smell is a forgotten chapter that still writes itself when the crowds thin. Beeswax once perfumed vigil nights. Later, olive oil lamps left a faint peppery sweetness. Now, there is the sterile tang of cleaning agents, mingled with the wool of countless coats. On damp afternoons, wet stone exhales a mineral scent that feels older than doctrine. Close your eyes, and the entire history compresses into aroma. Smoke, oil, dust, lemon from a janitor's bucket, breath. Listen under the central dome, and you'll notice how your voice doesn't just echo it, blooms, lingers, softens, and returns dressed in velvet. Acousticians recorded that bloom and stretched it digitally so we can hear a 9th century contation as the bricks heard it. A different test captured Quranic recitation rising in long arcs, each syllable nesting inside the previous like a set of porcelain bowls. Sound here is masonry you cannot see. Arches built of reverberation, vaults formed by decay times. Marble keeps secrets in its veins. A geologist could trace the Proconesian flow lines back to the quarry face above Marmara's water. A mythographer would say those gray feathers are frozen waves, carrying the sea inland to me. The Phrygian purple, flecked like night sky, seems to absorb candlelight, then sigh it back at dawn. Touch the column bases cool, slightly moist on summer mornings, and you touch prehistoric coral compressed into a throne for wisdom. Writing never stops. Ottoman calligraphers balanced on scaffolds, painting discs so large they needed iron chains to hold them taut. Before them, a Byzantine novice scratched a tiny cross into a pillar. Perhaps after a frightening voyage, in 1894, an Italian visitor scrawled initials near a stairwell. In 2012, a conservator penciled a date behind a restored opus sectile panel. Secret as a monk's marginal doodle. Graffiti is a democracy of presence. Emperors have chronicles. Workers have initials. Both insist I was here. Politics, too, replays its variations. A 1934 cabinet decree turned liturgy into exhibit. A 2020 court ruling rolled carpets back out, and microphones caught the first takbir beneath mosaics still vague. Screens around the world flickered with outrage and rejoicing and awed. Global iconostasis made of pixels. Meanwhile, inside, a janitor adjusted a mop bucket's squeaky wheel so it wouldn't disturb evening prayers. Grandeur and maintenance keep sharing the same corridor. Compare this vault to others without forcing sameness. The blue of Chartres pours devotion downward through glass. Borobudur spirals ascension through stone relief. The Kaaba writes orbit in footsteps. Hagia Sophia. Silk is a kiss across and a circle at once, then folds both into a dome that behaves like an inner sky. Tibetan mandalas draw deities into geometric palaces on sand. Here, geometry invites the divine to inhabit brick and breath. Japanese wabi-sabi would bless the hairline crack that reminds us perfection is a mirage. Byzantine homilies would call it a fissure through which grace seeps deeper. Hide inward, the lesson changes shape again. Foundations, the stories you rarely tell, compacted into strength. Piers, 4 virtues you choose on hard day: steadiness, honesty, courage, mercy, holding the weight of turmoil. Pendentives, awkward disciplines that make a circle possible: daily study, mindful silence, generous action, embodied rest. A ring of windows, 40 breaths at dawn, or 40 days off the habit that dulls your heart. At the apex, a dome, the quieted mind, not empty, but spacious enough to let light diffuse without glare. Technology adds a final, ironic shimmer. Fake headsets let insomniacs wander galleries at 3 a.m., pausing to zoom in on a tessera no god would let them touch. Photogrammetric models reveal microtilts invisible to the eye, like a physician's scan catching in a symptomatic murmur. Data becomes devotion for a certain temperament, graphs as rosaries, simulations as meditations on fragility and endurance. The building keeps teaching that wisdom wears any tool that serves her. If this weaving of bricks and breaths, decrees and dreams, continues to anchor your own explorations, you're gently invited to remain with us. Quiet support, be it a comment, a subscription, or a shared moment of reflection, acts like another discreet buttress, letting this arch of inquiry span a little farther. The rain has stopped. Night air cools the lead plates. A lone cat slips between columns, tail high. Sovereign of the after-hours nave. High above, a tessera no larger than a fingernail catches a late glimmer from the city, and for an instant, the dome seems to inhale then exhale gold. Before sunrise, a pale glow seeps through storm glass and settles on the marble like dew, deep inside the walls. Tiny crystals push outward salt blooms, delicate as hoarfrost, born from capillary water, dragging minerals to the surface. Conservators arrive with cotton swabs and patience. Removal is a ritual of touch, gentler than any homily, because one careless scrape can open a wound a century wide. Laser beams, pulses of cool light, now erase soot without bruising gold. Ho unit hums softly as it kisses grime off a tessera, the way a monk might lift ash from a relic. The beam's wavelength is chosen so dirt absorbs, glass reflects. Physics becomes discernment. Under the microscope, the clean surface sparkles like a field of tiny suns, each ready to scatter the next shaft of morning. Voices of women thread this story too, not always in the foreground, yet woven through every course. Theodora's resolve stood beside Justinian's decree, Patronage networks of empresses, widows, and abbesses funneled coin and cloth to workshops that fed the site. Centuries later, Ottoman Waqf records list female donors, endowing oil for lamps and bread for laborers. A temple of wisdom would be incomplete without the hands that kneaded dough and balanced ledgers in shadowed rooms. Shift the angle and Ottoman philanthropy steps in. Soup kitchens steaming behind the apse. Schools teaching calligraphy within earshot of the muezzin. Fountains gifting cold water to passers-by on sweltering August days. Hagia Sophia was never just a shell of prayer. It was a node in a welfare web where stone, script, and sustenance braided into one civic liturgy. Up in a gallery, a face peers through lime, the Decis Mosaicis Christ, sorrow soft in gold and lapis, with Mary and John bending toward mercy. The 13th century breathed these figures into being after Latin swords had left, a plea in pigment for forgiveness and restoration. Close enough, you see the artist's hand, tesserae angled to catch candlelight so the pupils seem wet. Farther back, the trio floats in a sea of gold, compassion distilled as shimmer. A few columns away, rough letters zigzag in stone runic scratches, likely from Varangian guards who served the emperor. Halfdan was here. One line seems to mutter across a millennium. Viking steel once clanged on these floors. Now a tourist brushes past. Unaware his shoulder nearly grazed a Norse name carved on Byzantine line. The building stores these collisions of worlds like a grand ledger of crossings. Not all residents chant. Swifts nest in cornices, bats nap in hollows, cats patrol the narthex with the calm of old priests. Pest control crews lace pheromone traps behind panels to deter moths from tapestries. Biological life writes footnotes everywhere. Lichens darken exterior stones. Fungi nibble at wooden doors. Bacteria etch micro-canals across stucco. Science now reads those patterns like marginalia, learning how to keep decay in dialogue, not in dominance. There was a year, 2020, when footsteps hushed, tour groups vanished, pandemic protocols sealed borders, and the vast floor, once a braided river of languages, grew empty enough to hear the buzz of an exit sign. Then prayer returned, carpets unfurled, yet the tourist tide lagged. Echo replaced murmur. Caretakers spoke of eerie clarity. The dome answered whispers with cathedral-length sighs. Absence carved its own relief into memory. Cues resumed eventually, but sensors track them now. Infrared counters tally bodies. Algorithms predict wear on marble aisles, the way doctors forecast stress on aging bones. Schedules stagger to rest the stone. Maintenance has become contemplative scheduling, rotating closures like liturgical seasons, giving each section time to breathe. Meanwhile, a server found far away hums with terabytes of point clouds. Students in Sao Paulo or Seoul slip on headsets and wander digitized galleries at 3 a.m., pausing to examine a crack that a drone captured from a scaffold. No visitor climbs. Technology doesn't replace presence, but it widens pilgrimage allowing awe to ride fiber optics and settle in dim apartments where incense would set off smoke alarms. Comparison spirals outward again. Navajo sand paintings vanish after ceremony. Tibetan monks brush mandalas into being only to sweep them away. Japanese temple carpenters rebuild shrines every 20 years, honoring impermanence. Hagia Sophia has persisted through deliberate erasure and accidental survival, icons veiled, unveiled, revealed, teaching a complementary lesson. Endurance can be as sacred as evanescence, provided it stays flexible. Turn inward with that. Your salts are the old resentments that crystallize when emotions dry. You remove them with small, repeated kindness before they flake your surface. Your lasers are acts of clear, seeing precise, cool, targeted, stripping soot without scarring gold. Sensors could be journals, body scans of mood, tiny graphs of strain that warn before collapse. Maintenance cycles, not crises, keep a dome outer or inner from shattering under the next tremor. Wisdom here refuses to sit still. Sometimes she's a beam of dawn slipping through scaffolding. Sometimes a spreadsheet of humidity readings. Sometimes a runic scrawl you almost missed. She moves between chant and code, between Ottoman ink and Byzantine gold leaf, between a cat's paw prints in dust and a conservator's nitrogen glove. Calling her Sophia may help. Letting her teach you through processes, not pronouncements, will help more. If you find nourishment in this long braid of stone and symbol, your quiet presence, subscribing, sharing a thought, returning for another passage, helps keep the arch from sagging. Support is just another word for load distribution. The first hint of morning brushes the dome. Lead plates sigh as they trade night's chill for day's warmth. Hums for a heartbeat in the oculus of sky, then glides away. Below, in the half-dark, a single drop of condensed water releases from a chain, falls, and disappears into marble, leaving no mark, only a sound like a tiny bell no one else hears. Underfoot, a constellation of circular marbles, greens, purples, creams quietly marks the Omphalion, the navel where emperors once stood to be crowned. Robes heavy with pearls swished over those veined stones, purple boots planted on the cool inlay, while a patriarch lowered a diadem that smelled faintly of incense and old myrrh. The floor remembers weight far better than any chronicle. A thin ribbon of incense smoke once curled past a jeweled sleeve and vanished into the dome's dusk. Coronation was choreography as much as theology. An acclamation rolled like thunder from choir to nave. Silver trumpets flashed. Eunuchs lifted silk curtains at perfect hues to reveal or conceal sacred spaces. In the patriarch's hand, the Hagia silk pouch of dust reminded the newly crowned that glory evaporates. Meanwhile, far above, light slid across gold tesserae, crowning the crowd in a borrowed aureole. The city outside erupted in races and bread, yet here, at the heart, the right beat in slow, deliberate pulses. Centuries earlier, vision itself had been contested, when imperial edicts began scraping saints from walls in the 8th century. Plaster crosses replaced faces, and pigments slept beneath lie. Iconoclast soldiers chiseled halos into anonymity. Iconophile monks hid panels in cellars, wrapping them like sleeping children. Dei Chielro. When the first image returned in 843, processions carried icons high. Candles guttering wax onto procession carpets, tears and hymns mixing until no one knew whether the glow came from gold. The Decis panel in the South Gallery, Christ flanked by Mary and John rose decades later. Each tessera turned just so to catch vigil lamplight. Step close and the pupils glisten. Step back and mercy radiates through a pond of gold. A mosaicist's hand-angled glass to make compassion visible after the Latin sack had passed. Restoration isn't just technical. It's a theological sigh breathed into stone. Bronze sings in hinges and doors. The southern portal, sheathed in plates, said to come from a pagan temple, once moaned like a low horn when winter swelled the metal. Candle soot lacquered its reliefs until a recent laser pass lifted centuries of breath. Near the narthex, an enormous vase of carved marble from Pergamon held holy water. Ottoman caretakers later dipped cups for ablutions where Byzantine hands once traced the cross. Water shifts rites, never losing its softness. Beneath the paving, cisterns lace the hill, dark chambers echoing with drips, holding the city's secret thirst. Engineers mapped them by candle flame, and later by sonar, finding columns sunk in perpetual twilight. One baptistery became a sultan's tomb. Stone fonts that once cradled infants now cradle sarcophagi draped in green silk. The element of birth turned shelter for endings. Another inversion carved by time. Color once hung in air as fabric. Silk curtains dyed with kermes and indigo divided sanctuary from nave. Shimmering like liquid walls, veils lifted at epiclesis. Later, Ottoman textiles embroidered with Quranic verses softened acoustics under semi-domes. Textiles are gone now. Light replaced them, but their memory lingers in how sound still feels slightly muffled along certain arcs, as if threads continue to drink the edge off echoes. Power-carved private niches. In the 18th century, Sultan Mahmud commissioned the Hünkar Mafili, a royal loge wrapped in carved screens, granting the ruler a secluded view of prayer. A hidden corridor carried him from palace to perch, without meeting the crowd. Authority prefers altitude and anonymity. Architecture obliged, threading secrecy into devotion's fabric. 21st century rituals veil images anew, though with cloths designed by conservators rather than polemicists. During prayers, curtains slide over mosaics to honor aniconic worship. Afterward, they reopen to tourists' lenses. LED panels monitor lux levels, dimming when sunlight spikes too bright. Algorithms now decide when gold may flare and when it must rest, veiling, unveiling an old rhythm. Learns a digital step. Dust carries archives no monk ever catalogued. Microbiologists swabbed cornices and found pollen from distant pines, spores that bloomed in damp winters, human skin cells layered like geological strata, DNA of bats and beetles curls beside that of bishops and janitors. To inhale here is to receive a sacrament of continuity in microscopic form. A sneeze might be a tiny exorcism. A sigh, a treaty with the air. Elsewhere, a conservator slides a probe into a hairline crack, measuring humidity that the eye cannot see. Data scrolls like prayer beads on a tablet, each point a quiet kyrie for structural mercy. After a distant quake, sensors murmur in numbers, and technicians walk the galleries like acolytes, checking readouts instead of oil levels in lamps. Vigil has shifted mediums, not meanings. Your own iconoclasm may be quieter. The habit of scraping away your finest images because someone once called them pride. Your own coronation might happen barefoot in a kitchen at dawn, hands wrapped around a mug, claiming a vow no one else hears. Floors can be stories you stand on with new weight. Veils can be boundaries you lift only when timing is right. And dries. A dome can steepen, so can a spine. If this unfolding crowns, cracks, curtains, codes, helps you sketch or rebuild your inner sanctuary, you're welcome to keep wandering these corridors with us. A simple gesture, subscribing, sharing, or sending a thought our way acts like a small marble plug in a widening fissure, almost unseen, entirely essential. Dawn presses its first pale coin of light against the oculus. Somewhere, a gilt feather on a seraph's wing ignites for a heartbeat, then dims. The marble chills again as the door sighs shut, and the dome keeps its long, patient breath. Dawn stains the paving between Hagia, Sophia, and the blue mosque, a quiet rose. And for a breath, the two domes seem to exchange glances across the square. One wears Sinan's disciplined symmetry, the other an older, experimental audacity. Minarets answer minarets, while gulls scribble white commas in the pale sky. A first call to prayer rides the cool air, threading through arches where antiphons once floated, two liturgical histories braided by morning mist. Near the northwest pier, a bronze-eyed circle glints from a column. Locals call it the weeping or sweating column. Moisture beads there on humid days, and pilgrims once pressed thumbs into the hollow, twisting slowly and asking for relief from pain or fever. The story runs that Gregory, the wonder worker's tears seeped, tuned into the stone. A more prosaic tale blames condensation along a metal dowel. Either way, the marble remembers the heat of a million palms, their salt now part of a patina you cannot polish away. Step toward the imperial door, taller than any figure who ever passed beneath it, sheathed in bronze said by some inexhaustible rumor to include fragments from an ark or a pagan temple. Each winter, swelling wood set the hinges groaning like a low horn. Conservators recently tuned that moan away with paraffin and tiny shims. Legends argue the door was carved from Noah's timber, though the grain whispers Anatolian cedar. Myth and dendrology share the jam, nod politely, and keep their counsel. High in the south gallery, Christ sits between Mary and John in the Decis. Sorrow tender as rain. Opposite, Zoe and Constantine, then John to second Komnenos and Irene, present gifts with jeweled hands in separate mosaics, glittering ledgers of imperial gratitude, etched in gold and lapis. If you shift angle, tesserae catch light like sequins on water. Shift, and the eyes, dull, withdrawing. The artisans angled each cube to make expression flow with the day's arc, compassion at dawn, serenity at noon, gravitas at dusk. Just outside, a cluster of octagonal mausoleums cradles sultans, Silenti Murad III, Mingim Threr, each wrapped in green-draped sarcophagi beneath domes painted with cartouches and stars. Children rest there at 2, tiny coffins lined in velvet, their names stitched in gold thread. Baptistery became tomb. Font became sarcophagus water vessel, turned reliquary of breath. Stones accept inversion without protest. Meaning is a tenant, not a deed holder. Le Corbusier wandered here in 1911, sketchbook open, confessing later that the space made him tremble. Ruskin wrote of the most lovely of domes, with grudging awe. Sinan measured, learned, and across centuries, architects treat this dome as a stern but generous tutor, one who accepts flattery only when it's structural. Every new skyline curve in Istanbul carries a little of her lesson. Lighten where you must. Brace where you can. Let light do half the work. Down in the narthex, a marble jar from Pergamon once held holy water. Ottoman caretakers dipped from it for ablutions. Water forgets doctrine faster than stone. It cools, cleanses, dissolves, equal to every lip. A few meters away, a Viking scratched Halfdan in runes along a balustrade. Iron scent, still hanging from his mail. The building turns polyglot every time your eye travels a few paces. Greek monograms curled on capitals, Arabic thuluth sweeping across medallions, Latin graffiti sulking in corners. Modern caretakers field new plagues. Salt efflorescence blooms like sugar frost on plaster. Drones skim under semi-domes, mapping micro-cracks with LiDAR. Grout syringes inject lime, based slurries into voids that once housed small birds. A conservation chemist might spend a week choosing an adhesive with the right vapor permeability, the way a monk once spent a week choosing the right hymn for a feast. Precision is devotion, just update the toolkit. Sound keeps recomposing itself. Choral scholar recently layered Byzantine chant recordings with contemporary Quranic recitation, letting frequencies braid in a lab until a spectral analysis showed the dome. Prefers certain harmonics, like a palette that carpets sip harsh consonants. Marble throws vowels back, sweeten. Stand under the center and murmur your name. The return comes softer, as if the dome has decided to adopt it. The city outside presses against these walls like a tide tram bells. Hawkers' cries, honking taxis, yet inside, A thermal lag delays that urgency. Marble cools slowly. Air currents move with the dignity of incense. On hot days, a faint mineral scent rises from the floor, while the lead sheath of the dome ticks as it expands. Night brings a different orchestra. Settling chains, the whisper of bats, distant horns on the Bosphorus. Every cycle inscribes a sonic mandala. You cannot frame, but can inhabit. Comparison reaches farther. St. Peter's in Rome stretches power horizontally before erupting upward. The Pantheon collects sky in a concrete bowl. Saint Chapelle devours its own walls in glass. Here, the square becomes a circle by way of 4 audacious triangles, an impossible seeming pivot that turned architectural grammar into poetry. In Kyoto, carpenters rebuild Isa Shrine every 20 years. It stays young by aging on purpose. Hagia Sophia survives by learning. Collapse, rise, brace, veil, unveil, repeat. Translate that to your inner city. Your weeping column is the spot where emotion beads through the veneer. Find it. Press gently. Let release come without drilling the whole wall. Your imperial door is the threshold you cross with intention. Leave shoes, ego, or distraction outside. Mosaics are the angles you give. Experience tilt memories, so they shine as lessons, not wounds. Tombs remind that projects end. Cisterns counsel storing stillness for drought seasons, and the dome, keep it light, porous to illumination, ribbed with practices that let it hold through tremor. If you're still with us, if these wanderings through stone and symbol spark correspondences in your own architecture, you are welcome to keep circle. A quiet subscribe or shared reflection becomes another discrete rib under this vast narrative, unseen but load-bearing. Sun now spills like molten brass across the Omphalion. Somewhere, a cat skims along a pewter shadow and disappears. High above, a single dove wheels, briefly framed in the oculus, before sliding into the bright. The building inhales daylight and exhales silence, and for a moment, the city feels perfectly balanced on a whisper of mortar. Evening lanterns wink to life, one by one, suspended like a low-slung constellation beneath the vast curve. Their glass bellies once held olive oil and trembling flame. Today, discreet leads mimic the sway without the smoke. Yet the rhythm of descent remains the slow lowering of light, until it grazes somewhere. A caretaker adjusts a chain link, and the entire galaxy shifts a fingertip's breadth, rewriting shadows. Beneath the stone skin, corridors spider outward brick tunnels, whispering toward the long crumbled great palace. Damp passages where echoes feel thick enough to touch. Workmen in the 19th century found fresco fragments in those guts. Sea monsters, courtiers, fragments of banquets the palace's lost dreamscape, buried under liturgy's heartbeat. Modern surveys probed farther with ground-penetrating pulses, tracing voids long forgotten. Some laid nowhere, some open into cisterns where water still waits, black and patient. The building is less a single body than a small city layered vertically. Floors of air and water, text and bone. Clockwork once ticked here too. The Fossati brothers mounted an iron clock in the narthex, its pendulum pacing the museum of the future, before the museum existed. Earlier still, Byzantine clepsydras measured sermons in dripping water beats. A homilist could gauge fervor against the cup's last drop. Time-keeping devices have traded roles. Now sensors count microscons between seismic murmurs, while visitors lose hours drifting under gold without noticing. Tactile memory accumulates on railings where shoulders lean. Bronze has been polished to a brownish gloss by countless coats and elbows in spots untouched. You find a green bloom of verdigris, like lichen on a forest bough. A conservator sometime in the 1970s scrolled a date inside a baluster, tiny graphite numbers. Already fading, signing stewardship the way a monk might have signed a marginal doodle in a gospel. Care is always personal before it is institutional. Of the Northern Aisle, a panel of opus sectile floor has been lifted and reset more times than anyone records. The marbles here are arranged like a map of imaginary islands, gulfs of green meeting tapes of red porphyry. Scholars debate symbolic geographies, but a child once traced those patterns with a toy car, steering over tectonic seams of empire, while a parent read a plaque. Reverence wears many shoes. Some have rubber soles and leave no sound. During Allied occupation after 1918, soldiers wandered beneath the dome, with cigarettes tucked behind ears, boots clicking on stone. Agents photographed mosaics by flashbulb. Harsh light startling the seraph faces awake for an instant, then plunging them back to slumber. In World War II, curators veiled gold under canvas and timber, fearing bombs. The building hunkered like a turtle, shell to the sky, waiting out lightning, forged by factories. Preservation sometimes means pretending to disappear. Sound archivists recently captured a whisper tone, barely audible, hidden in the 11-second decay. A flutter at 220 hertz that could be mortar resonance, or the sympathetic hum of chains. They draped colored spectrograms across the plan like liturgical vestments, carmine bands where vowels bloom, cobalt where consonants die. It turns out the dome has favorite notes, like spices a cook reaches for without thinking. Sing wrong, and the room softens your error. Sing right, and it lifts you with velvet hands. Step into the women's lodge of Ottoman days. The mahfil draped in lattice work, and the view tightens, framing the dome, the way a camera aperture does. Space edits itself according to vantage. Emperors from imperial box, sultans from screened balconies, commoners from mosaiced floors, tourists through phone screens. No one sees all of it. Everyone sees a facet. Wisdom survives by scattering herself among partial angles. Outside, the hippodrome's ghost still stretches a spine of chariot thunder, now paved for strollers and simmet sellers. Obelisks that once watched races now watch selfie sticks. Hagia Sophia heard those roars. Then the sullen silence after faction massacres. Then the drone of tour buses. The building's acoustic memory holds crowds like a shell holds the sea echo. Faint now, but discernible if you press an ear to the cool stone and wait. Inside the mihrab, fragments of Iznik tile flash turquoise and cinnabar under oblique light. A floral spray tulip, cypress, carnation sways in glaze. Ottoman paradise gardens poured onto clay. Mosaic gold nearby feels solar. Tile blue feels aqueous. The interior is an alchemical lab of color. Fire trapped in glass, water in glaze, earth in marble, air in the dome. The fifth element is the one you bring in attention, which binds the rest. Cranes once scissored over the nave, erected by Anthemius' cunning scaffold geometry. Timber frames interlocked like a forest transplanted. Today, a different crane, thin as a pen rises on temporary tracks. To reach a crack for grouting, the scale shrank, precision grew. Repair became acupuncture rather than surgery. Needles of lime slurry pushed into hairlines, coaxing the fabric to heal rather than be replaced. Bodies appreciate that kind of care. So do buildings. Imagine now your own cartography, hidden corridors. Those memories you don't visit because humidity beads on their bronze and fingers come away wet. Sterns, reservoirs of quiet you never tap until drought aches, a map of marbles underfoot. Choices set in patterns, some deliberate, some opportunistic spolia on which your future steps will land. Chain rings overhead, commitments that seem restrictive, but when tuned, let the span float free. Sensors humming, small daily check-ins preventing collapses that drama would dramatize too late. The calligraphic discs names of the first 4 caliphs curling in black script hang again after a stint in storage. Each weighs more than many cars, yet men lifted them with pulleys and faith in geometry. Letters larger than rooms declare presence in silence. Opposite, a faded Greek inscription on a column reminds, God in the midst of her. The languages do not duel. They overlay like transparent sheets, each text legible if you shift your eyes just so. If this unscrolling lanterns, tunnels, spectrograms, vows continues to sharpen or soften something essential. In you, you're invited to remain close, a quiet subscription, a shared reflection is a pebble under the pier, small, unseen, widening the arch's courage to courage. Night takes the square, the domes lead skin cools, contracting with a sigh you cannot hear but might feel if you press palm to peer. Far above, a single bulb misfires, flickers, steadies, flickers like a tiny star second-guessing itself, then deciding to burn. Somewhere between pillar and shadow, a low iron ring still hangs ghost of a colossal chandelier that once descended like a stellar crown above the nave. Oil flames floated there in their hundreds, mirrored in gold tesserae until night itself seemed gilded. When the chain creaked, a soft galaxy shifted, and the whole congregation felt the dome breathe a little closer. The amber once stood off-center, like a marble ship, with twin stairways from which deacons launched words into the vault. Their voices rode the 8 Byzantine equi modes, unfolding like petals, while an eisen droned beneath, a patient hum that taught the ear to rest inside sound. Centuries later, a muezzin's melismatic call braided makam scales through the same air, each note tasting of cardamom dust. Modes changed, but the dome kept its favorite harmonics, smoothing sharpness, feeding warmth back down like a mother bird. Processions traced invisible diagrams. Clergy circled the solea, crossed the nave, vanished behind curtains, reappeared under a shower of candlelight. Footfalls set a metronome for doctrine. Approach, withdraw, reveal, conceal. When the icon screen thickened into an iconostasis elsewhere, Hagia Sophia retained openness barriers, low, space fluid, so theology moved as bodies did. Later, Ottoman prayer lines drew straight vectors toward Mecca, a new geometry overlaying the old spiral. Stand still, and you can feel both patterns tug at your spine, the curve and the arrow. Dance and focus. Sunlight arrives here as scripture. It pours through 40 slits around the dome, then fractures across thousands of glass squares backed with gold leaf, so thin a breath could lift it. The tilt of each cube decides how mercy looks at noon versus vespers. The Quran's light, verse once unfurled, under that radiance light upon light, just as patristic sermons praised Sophia as a lamp of the mind. Photons do not debate. They anoint stone and script with the same indifferent generosity. Our century added a subtler illumination. Infrared scans, revealing lost fresco lines. Ultraviolet fluorescence, coaxing pigments to confess their composition. LiDAR mapping every curve. Somewhere on a server, the building exists as coordinates and vectors, a numerical mandar ready to spin on command. Scholars zoom through brick strata like astronauts through nebulae, measuring cracks in microns, listening to reverberation as color bands. Light now writes in wavelengths, chores once ignored. Moisture keeps testing boundaries. Winter breath condenses on cool surfaces. Droplets threading down iron cramps hidden in joints. When rust swells, marble sighs. Salt crystals, born from wicking groundwater, push like tiny knives against plaster skin. Cotton poultices lift them in slow ablutions. It looks like science. It feels like liturgy. Precision is mercy when a dome is older than most nations. Hidden staircases snake within the piers, tight coils for lamplighters, guards, and choristers, stealing quick paths between levels. Step into one, and the world narrows to brick and echoing footfalls, then explodes again into gold and space. Such transitions trained perception. Contraction, expansion, darkness, blaze. Inner work follows similar corridors, tunnels of focus, leading to sudden widenings, where thought has room to turn luminous. A rumor persists that a fragment of the true cross slept beneath the altar, sealed in silver the day of dedication. Another whispers that the bronze of the imperial door holds splinters from Noah's Ark. Timber analysis and metallurgical assays would disagree, but legends knit communities. They are mortar between stones of different ages. Let the stories live, treat them as parables the building tells to keep attention awake. Wind scribes its own glosses. It sneaks through clerestory vents, curls down semi-domes, nudges incense. Once, now stirs dust motes like drifting planets. On storm days, the lead sheets above tick and groan. You might hear a bass murmur if you press ear to appear. Engineers call it thermal expansion. Mystics might call it the dome's prayer in metal syllables. Both are true in the way parallel lines share a horizon. Compare again, but diagonally. The Roman pantheon holds an oculus that reigns in sunlight and weather. Hagia Sophia prefers filtered radiance, a diadem of windows. Sainte-Chapelle dissolves walls into sapphire glass. Here, Mass asserts itself, yet floats. The great mosque of Cordoba scatters arches like a palm grove. This basilica gathers its thrusts into 4 patient piers. Each structure solves weight with theology. Each suggests a way of holding the infinite without shattering. Apprentice masons once learned curve mathematics by hand, tracing catenaries in wet sand with chords and stakes. Today's interns learn finite element analysis, running quake simulations at midnight. Both feel the same quiet thrill when a line of force closes cleanly and the form sings in numbers. You can sense that resonance in your chest, standing under a well-tuned arch. It feels like a held note finally resolving. Inside your own architecture, an ambo could be the place you speak truth without performance, a kitchen table, a page, a quiet call to a friend. The solia is the narrow path between impulse and decision. Leave it uncluttered. Curtains you lift at the right moment protect mysteries until they mature. 40 windows may be habits that let light in, breath, study, kindness, solitude. Song choose enough to ring your inner dome. And the great chain, commitments that seem heavy until you notice how they lower illumination to where you can actually touch it. We've drifted long through these chambers together. If this weaving of mortar and metaphor keeps adding ribs to your own dome, feel free to remain subscribed if you wish, or simply return when the next tremor or dawn invites you. Quiet companionship is the most reliable buttress. Night deepens. Custodian pads across the nave, flashlight beam skimming marble like a comet tail. High above, gold pixels wait for tomorrow's sun, while deep below, cistern water barely ripples. The building holds its breath, and in that pause, you might feel it. A vast, steady heartbeat pulsing through stone, patient as wisdom itself. A narrow, paneled slab in the South Gallery locals call it. The marble door slides the eye from public span to hidden chamber, its twin leaves veined like frozen smoke. Once sealed a council room where bishops argued creeds and emperors' annals. Aced on mosaic swirls. Push it in your mind. Hands are forbidden now, and the air cools. thick with the ghost scent of beeswax and vellum. Silence in there had weight. Decisions elsewhere felt feather light by comparison. Scribes huddled nearby in winter dusk, copying homilies onto purple-dyed parchment with gold and silver ink, letters glinting like constellations caught in a grape-dark sky. Eyeless scored guidelines, a reed pen, breathed metallic strokes. One cough could blot a saint's name. One sleepy flourish could turn a theta into a row. By morning, pages dried beside charcoal braziers, their edges curling slightly, ready to be sewn into codices that would slide, wrapped in leather, through that same marble throat. Far below, cedar beams the length of fishing boats once crisscrossed the nave as scaffolds, lashed with flax ropes that creaked under wind, leaking through clerestory slits. Iron clamps bit brick with swallowtail profiles. Molten lead sealed joints against rust, long before chemistry had acronyms for corrosion. A mason could tell good lime mortar by how it pinched between finger and thumb, pliable, not paste, young, not chalk dry. Knowledge passed by grip and glance, not manuals. In 1204, Latin steel rang on those clamps. In 1261, when Byzantines returned, the ambo stood scorched, silver railings dented. Craftsmen hammered new repoussé panels in alleys still reeking of smoke, chasing vine scrolls over hammered copper to catch lamp glow. Later, a June day in 1894 shuddered through the city, arches cracked like old knuckles, and one semi-dome shedded plaster in a white avalanche. Ottoman engineers chalked stress lines on piers, turning catastrophe into diagrams before dusk. Abdulmecid's orders in the 1840s brought Gasper and Giuseppe Fossati with palettes and plumb bobs. They peeled lime from angels' faces, sketched every capital, introduced chandeliers that hung like lakes of fire. Kazaska Mustafa, is it, dipped thick nibs into black and drew Allah's name so large it swallowed a wall tensioned on timber hoops, hoisted by pulleys, steadied by prayer. A century later, museum curators lowered those discs and stacked them like giant coins. In our decade, they rose again, letters sailing the nave like black planets. Engineers today give the dome a tap, not with knuckles, but with impulse. Sweeps then watch its answer unfurl as a ribbon of color on a screen. 11 seconds of reverberation, bloom and fade. A velvet tail where frequencies lounge. A warm hump around 130 hertz. A subtle flutter near 220. Sing a wronged note, and the room forgives. Sing a humble one, and it lifts, coats it in gold dust, returns it kinder. Breath becomes algebra under that curve. Equations hum like drones beneath chant. Hidden stairs spiral inside piers, brick tight to shoulder. where lamplighters once hustled and guards slipped unseen. One turn, two, then a hatch pops you into gallery, glare eyes dilate. Time reorders. These contractions and bursts trained perception centuries before mindfulness. Apse, focus, expand, descend, descend, dim, blaze. The body learned theology kinesthetically. Muscles memorizing what minds might doubt. Rumors still rustle. A silver reliquary under the altar top. A sliver of the ark melted into a hinge. A saint's sandal tucked in a column hollow. Wood grain and metallography shrug. But the tales keep pilgrims attentive. And attention, more than accuracy, is what sacred space constantly craves. Let legends linger as parables. Treat facts like bones under skin, necessary, unseen, supporting. Wind scribbles marginalia on lead sheets, especially when the Bosphorus flexes muscle. Thermal ticks answer when sun trades with cloud. Discreet clacks you miss until you're alone. And the nave is a shell. Conservation teams. Note these in logs, audible expansion. 14:7. The way monks once recorded miracles. Different ink, same impulse. Track the invisible so the visible endures. Turn that mirror inward. Perhaps your marble door is a boundary you slide only when your inner counsel is ready. Your purple pages are ideas, inked in rare hours, glowing when the rest of the day goes gray. Clamps and ropes become friendships and rituals, holding when earthquakes of mood rattle arches you thought eternal. An 11-second reverb. That's the time you let a slighted word echo before answering. So it returned softened, not sharpened. Algebra of breath, indeed. If walking these layers steadies your own scaffolds. Keep wandering with us. Whispered support, a subscribe. A quiet share is a beam slipped into the lattice, barely seen, unquestionably felt. Outside, dusk boils down to indigo. Inside, a last maintenance lamp clicks off for a heartbeat, gold tesserae. Remember the sun and release it in a sigh so faint. Only the stones noticed then. Night closes like a velvet curtain, tucked into the northwest corner. A small octagonal pavilion glows with lacquered walnut and turquoise tile, the Sultan's library, added under Mahmud I. Shelves once cradled Qurans, written in a hand so steady it felt like leather spines creaked in summer heat. Winter's damp, curled page edges into gentle waves. Scholars murmured verses beside latticed windows, while, just beyond, the vast nave held its own unreadable book of light. Across the apse, a mother and child hover in tesserae, laid in 867, when paint returned after years of scraped plaster. The Virgin sits on a jeweled throne. The child raises a small hand, finger and thumb, touching in a gesture midway between blessing and thought. A cross had occupied that gold sea during iconoclastic decades. Now flesh, however stylized, re-entered vision. Each cube of glass is tilted minutely. so a candle at dusk gives her iris a wetness that morning. Sun cannot. Ottoman craftsmen answered image with script. The minbar carve for murad gleams like petrified lace. Each arabesque curve a syllable of praise, frozen in marble. Opposite, the muezzin's platform lofts, a voice above heads, so the first consonant lands where the ear is open. Sound and stone negotiate constantly here. A carpet softens sibilance, a dome cradles vowels, a wooden grill filters breath into rhythm. Architectural acoustics becomes an unwritten score, adjusted across centuries without a single conductor's baton on. Glee, the grey-green-eyed cat who made tourists kneel for selfies, once threaded pewter shadows between columns, claiming the Omphalion as a nap spot. She outlived popes and presidents' photo ops, died in 2020, and left hair caught in a crack between two marbles, a relic as humble as dust. Animals keep archives humans overlook. Pigeons mapping eaves, swifts sketching air currents, a stray dog sleeping through an earthquake. Nobody else felt. The building holds their lives with the same equanimity it grants emperors. Digital twins multiply now. A full spectrum scan breathes under the dome, in servers far from Istanbul. Every crack and curve translated into coordinates. Machine learning models test hypothetical quakes, suggest where a hidden void might lurk, flash warning colors across a parametric mock-up, long before a hairline fissure shows on stone. White conservators speak of data patina layers of recordings, photos, humidity logs, that age the building electronically as surely as soot once did physically. Engineers whisper about base isolators, dampers, and graphite bearings that could someday let the whole mass glide through tremors like a ship riding swell. Such surgery would be delicate. How do you lift 1,000-year dome to slip a cushion under its feet? Yet thought experiments sketch possibilities. Steel ribs inside piers, smart grout pulsing sensors through lime like nerves. The body learns to feel itself, to report pain early, to self-correct biofeedback on a monumental scale. Elsewhere on the hill, the old Medres courtyards remember debates over hadith chains, while a soup kitchen's vanished hearth once simmered lentils for the poor. Hagia Sophia never stood alone. It pulsed within an ecosystem of care fountains, schools, kitchens, each a sacrament of daily need. Those functions drifted away and reassembled across the city, but the blueprint remains. Stone for wonder, brick for bread, script for memory. Map that inward. A reading room within you might be a corner where attention sits among well-thumbed thoughts. Dust motes turning in sun like shy ideas. The app's mosaic becomes your re-entry of feeling after a season of self-erasure color. Returning where only outlines survive. Script could be the promises you carve gently, repeated until they ornament your days. A cat named Glee might stand for the small, living joys that curl on your plans and demand a nap-shaped hole in them. And the digital twin, journals, therapy notes, vital signs data that teaches you to notice stress before collapse. No trumpet of thanks here, just a soft reminder. If these wanderings fortify something subtle in you, walk with us again. A quiet follow, a thought shared, is like a hidden tie rod. Nobody sees it, but the span rests easier. Midnight leans into the dome. Somewhere, between two gold cubes, a single grain of sand catches the last photon, slipping from a street lamp. Flashes once an almost imagined star and goes dark. The building settles, remembering everything, preparing for a tomorrow. It will meet with the calm of stone and the curiosity of light. First, a blush of copper dawn slips through scaffolding gaps and lays itself across a hairline fracture on the southern semi-dome, turning damage into a temporary vein of fire. A drone hums quietly near the cornice, its camera licking up pixels of decay no ladder can reach, while a conservator below watches the feed like an augur reading flight paths. Morning here has become diagnosis and prayer. At once sunlight, tracing symptoms, humans answering with lime and patience. Later, in a side chapel turned storage alcove, crates hold rolled textiles, embroidered with verses, resting beside boxes of mosaic tesserae, sorted by hue and thickness. Labels whisper dates and humidity percentages. Silica gel sachets sit like small talismans against damp. Someone unfolds a faded curtain, indigo, gone to ash blue, and breathes in a century of incense woven into its threads. Fabric carries liturgy the way marble carries footsteps. Quietly, thoroughly, refusing to be hurried. By midday, the dome drinks heat, and lead sheets tick like an enormous clock the city forgot to wind. A bird circles the oculus, then darts down an air shaft, startling dust that glitters before dissolving. In the museum years, guards would clap once to silence echoes. Now an imam's low recitation rides the same acoustics, words stroking brick like a hand on an old friend's shoulder. Different syllables, same physics of comfort vibration, seeking a place to rest. Down in the substructures, water mutters to itself. Cistern arches bead with condensation. A flashlight beam reveals mosquito larvae wavering like punctuation in a black paragraph. Engineers debate whether to seal a seep or let the wall breathe. Choices here are always between two goods, never between good and evil. Limestone wants to exhale. Fresco wants to stay dry. The compromise becomes an art of margins. Enough ventilation to soothe. Enough closure to save paint from mold. Afternoon brings tourists in tides, a murmur of languages. The staccato of camera shutters, shoes pattering over ancient opus sectile. Infrared counters click silently over doorways, tallying souls to forecast load on stone. A planner in a nearby office drags colored blocks on a calendar, closing one gallery next week to rest it, opening another to disperse the weight. The schedule reads like a liturgical calendar for architecture. Feast days of cleaning, fasts of darkness, jubilees of unveiling. Near a pier, A small plaque explains the Varangian ruins. A child traces Halfdan with a finger, thrilled that a Viking carved where she now stands. Across the nave, a grandmother squints at Arabic Thuluth, mouthing familiar names. Eyes jump scripts like stones in a river. Each leap a tiny bridging of centuries. The building has become a language classroom without a teacher grammar, taught by juxtaposition and awe. Sunset stages its quiet drama. Amber pours through the 40 windows, splinters on gold. Pools in marble swirls, and finally thins to a lavender film. A caretaker walks the aisles with a portable lux meter, checking that radiance doesn't scorch pigment past its tolerance. Numbers glow, green safe. He exhales. Safety here is measured in lumens and seconds, yet everyone still speaks of wonder. Quantification hasn't strangled miracle. It has learned to cradle it. Night descends, and sensors wait. Accelerometers whisper microtremors to a server farm. Thermistors log the dome's cooling curve. A webcam blinks infrared, feeding an archive no pilgrim will scroll. All data stacks like sediment, layering years of breaths, vibrations, candle equivalents, quakes, dark. Someday, a researcher will mine that strata and hear, in graphs, the same slow heartbeat poets heard in metaphor. Numbers, too, can hum if you listen long enough. Across town, a small congregation in a rented hall chants an all-night vigil before a printed icon of Hagia Sophia, their voices spilling into a strip mall's neon. Deisaf. Elsewhere, via power, pilgrims pace pixelated aisles at 2 a.m., pausing to magnify a tessera set by hands, now dust. Diaspora sew portable domes from memory and code. The original smiles in stone, unoffended, knowing that true sanctuaries clone themselves in the psyche long before bricks. Turn inward with that map. Perhaps you sense microcracks under your own plastered, calm hairline stresses that flare gold when the right light finds them. Maybe you've stashed old promises in labeled boxes, thinking you'll restore them when life allows. Your inner cistern might be the silence you keep postponing. Your air shafts are poems, songs, walks that ventilate the mind. Sensors could be small questions you ask yourself nightly. Where did I strain? Where did I soften? Where did I glow too hot? If these wandering corridors of stone and metaphor keep giving you anchors or wings, you're gently welcome to stay in the procession. Subscribe if you like, or simply return when another door in this labyrinth beckons. Quiet support feels like a hidden tie bar across a widening span, unseen, indispensable. Midnight settles. Pat's shadow slips behind a column. A bat flickers once and is gone. High above, a lone tessera catches a stray photon from a passing car, winks, and goes dark. The dome, vast and unhurried, shifts a fraction as the city dreams. already remembering tomorrow's first breath of light. Before the outer chains clatter up for visitors, a slim trolley hums across the nave. Its nozzle, sipping dust from mortar, join a monk once lifted ash from a relic. A conservator trails behind with a thermal camera, painting the pier in false colors to spot damp blooms before they crystallize into salt. Cold patches glow indigo on her screen, little storms forming under stone skin. High above, a temporary scaffold crouches like an articulated insect knees of steel, joints of pin and clamp rising toward a hairline crack near the western arch. Each clamp carries a barcode. Scanners log torque, values, so no joint loosens in secrecy. The crew ascends with harness and murmured jokes, pockets clinking with syringes of lime grout that will stitch brick without leaving a scar. Out on the lead roof, honeybees browse herb planters set by an overcautious gardener time. Rosemary, lavender intended to keep joints dry by drinking runoff. Lead sheets overlap like fish scales. Seams soldered with tin patches that flash pewter when the sun hits. Lightning rods, copper-threaded, spike skyward. When a storm spits fire, charge slides down into earth instead of stone. The dome survives by giving thunder a polite exit. Pigeons lost their roosts when netting went up, so a falconer visits at dawn, glove extended, bird veering in tight arcs that write deterrence in the air. A harmless citrus-scented gel now smears favored ledges. Feathers dislike it. Stone tolerates it. The old smell of oil lamps has given way to citrus, resin, disinfectant, an olfactory palimpsest that still carries, if you inhale slowly, a ghost of wax somewhere beneath. In a small lab off the narthex, a xenon arc lamp blasts a mosaic fragment with controlled light for a microfading test. Scientists watch pigments blanch by microns to predict when the real gold might type. Beside them, vials of lime water, casein, and nanolime line up like autocrutes, awaiting their turn to soak into flaking plaster. Lapis grains under microscope reveal raw edges from Badakhshan quarries. Malachite nodules sparkle a damp green reminiscent of moss after rain. An oak lintel removed during repair lies on sawhorses, its rings red like scripture. Dendrochronologists match patterns to Anatolian drought years, dating the beam to a winter felled when snow lay heavy on Ionian hillsides. Ta sjøstivil ba chiun shes and next to it, Gilder's 3D print, a missing capital volute in plaster. Then leaf it with wafer thin gold beaten on calfskin. Technology bends to tradition. Tradition swallows technology whole and keeps its shine. Coins glint in cracks along the Omphalian, slipped by hands that still crave tangible wishes. Attendants sweep them nightly into envelopes marked for charity, a quiet economy circling back to bread. Wide scribbled prayers fold into seams behind a lattice. Someone will gather them, archive a few, compost the rest. Candles are forbidden, so lead votives cluster on a side table, flickering in pre-programmed randomness that almost fools the eye. Bright plaques now stud doorway jams, and a lift discreetly tucks into a former storage shaft, carrying wheelchairs toward galleries emperors reached by marble ramps. Palkilingjay, Elsnix Tower, Pandolfs, Pi, Pa. Accessibility widened the theology of space. Thresholds lowered, slopes gentled. Audio guides whispered mosaics into ears that can't see them. Inclusion here is not a sermon, but a slope angle. A handrail's radius, a hinge that opens softly. Vibrations from the metro tunnel shiver the clay below. Sensors on piers register the faint shudder, and engineers compare graphs to tram timetables. The city's pulse taps the dome's ribs daily. Algorithms filter benign rumble from dangerous frequency. Out on the square, Simmet sellers ring bells, roasting sesame scent into morning. Bread and sanctuaries have shared economies since the first queue formed. Outside, a temple gate. A scheduling app paints heat maps of foot traffic across the nave. Red blooms around the decis at noon. Blue pools inside aisles at 4. Curators stagger tour groups like monks once staggered fasts, letting stone rest between rushes. The calendar reads UV rest day for the apps, humidity purge for the baptistry feasts, and fasts for matter instead of souls, though the distinction blurs in practice. Sound technicians wheel in an array of speakers to capture impulse responses for wave field synthesis. They'll recreate the dome's velvet reverb in a concert hall. Miles away, letting an audience hear chant wear the same golden coat without boarding a plane. In another room, a printer extrudes limestone paste into a missing cornice fillet. Layer by patient layer, additive liturgy, where once chisels subtracted. Snow rarely reaches inside. Yet dust storms from Anatolia sometimes drift through vents, sprinkling ochre over capitals like a faint desert blessing. During one fierce squall decades ago, grit invaded galleries, scratching glass with a million tiny claws. Lessons learned then birthed new seals, baffles, and seasonal protocols. The dome learns from weather the way a sailor learns from seas, not by resisting, but by anticipating. Translate these thresholds inward. Ramps can be the kindness that lets tired parts of you reach upper galleries. Rail is the habit of explaining yourself gently to the blind corners of your own mind. Coins dropped in cracks become small acts of generosity tossed into days you'll forget. Yet someone will feel. Sensors are your nightly questions. Scaffolds your patience with slow repair. Citrus gel the boundaries that keep old habits from roosting again. And these on the roof? Tiny joys tending rooftop gardens you didn't know you had, making sweetness from what runs off. If these textures solder seams, drone feeds, barcoded clamps continue to steady or widen your own architecture, you're welcome to linger. A quiet subscribe or shared reflection feels like a micro buttress. No one sees, but everyone leans on. Twilight folds in. Lead plates sigh as they cool. A final bee finds its hive. The falcon sleeps hooded. Somewhere deep in the pier, A drop of water decides its path and chooses, mercifully, the drain. Above, one more star slides behind a cloud, and the dome, patient and alert, counts heartbeats you will never hear. At the spring equinox, a blade of light slides down from the clerestory and drifts across the nave like a slow compass needle. For a few breaths, it kisses the Omphalian's marbles, then glides toward the imperial gate, sketching a luminous path through dust. Architects may call it coincidence of latitude and fenestration. Mystics see choreography. Sun and stone rehearsing an old vow to meet exactly here, exactly then. That towering imperial gate once framed an emperor's approach. Above it, Christ sits stern and tender, a book open on his knee, while a kneeling ruler, likely Leozix, touches the floor with his brow. Around them, archangels hover in medallions, their wings folded like knives of light. The bronze-clad door creaked with winter swell, exhaled resin in summer. Legend swore its wood came from Noah's Ark. Dendrochronology answers with Anatolian cedar. Story and ring count share the jam. Neither offended by the other. Step backward into the outer vestibule, and another mosaic unfurls. Mary holding the child, enthroned against a gold sea, while Constantine offers a model of the city, and Justinian raises a miniature Hagia. The gesture is more than imperial propaganda. It's a ritual of giving back what one cannot truly own. Stone and street are presented like loaves at an altar take. Transform us, return us, whole. That economy of offering still hums. When a visitor slips a coin into a crack, or a caretaker lifts dust with reverence, before bells tolled over Constantinople, wooden Simandra, the Simandron board, rang like thunder made of cedar. Monks lifted mallets and struck rhythms that summoned prayer without bronze or clapper. Later, Ottoman muezzins climbed minarets with lunged and phrase in place of bells. Sound here always arrived as breath and wood, or breath and word. Never cast metal, even now. Restoration crews tap stone with their knuckles, listening for hollows. A dull thud can mean a void. A clear ring, assurance. The building sings back its condition, if you know the beat. Semidomes cradle the main vault like cupped hands. Exedrae bloom from the nave like side chapels without walls. Each curve diffuses force and gathers echo. Acoustic researchers mapped nodes where a whisper swells and spots where sound dies abruptly. Stand on one of those vanishing points and speak. Your sentence seems to slip through a crack in reality. Step a pace to the left, and the dome hands your voice back, velvet-lined. It's a geometry of breath. The body learns, without diagrams. Tiny drones no bigger than swifts now skim along cornices, their lighter pulses reading brick joints with sub-millimetric fussiness. Algorithms stitch the data into ghostly meshes. Conservators trace stress trajectories like physicians reviewing capillaries. A microcrack discovered at dawn can be grouted by dusk. Lime slurry eased in with syringes that make almost no sound. Repair has become acupuncture more than surgery needles, not chisels. Pulses, not picks. Life persists in miniature rebellions. Lichen freckle stone, where sunlight lingers. Silver fish skitter under skirting boards. Tasting starch from old paste. Biocides must be chosen so gently. They kill the intruder without wounding the host. Alchemy of a new age. A bat colony once nested behind an app's grill. Ultrasonic surveys coax them toward a purpose-built roost outside. Creature kinship is negotiated now, not enforced. Wisdom wears gloves and night vision goggles. A mesh of accelerometers laces the piers. Whispering tremor data to a central server. Metro trains, distant quakes. Even marching tourist groups register as vibrations. Software flags anomalies the way a vigilant monk once flagged heresy quietly after a tremor. Mirrors walk the aisles with tablets. Overlays glowing red where stress spiked, blue where stone rested easy. The dome has learned to feel itself. Numbness would be fatal. Inside, every threshold invites an inward twin. The imperial gate asks, where do you bow before entering yourself? The vestibule mosaic suggests offering your city, your habits, ambitions, hearts back to the source that holds them better than you can. The Simandran's wooden beat becomes the practice of calling your scattered thoughts without fanfare. Just rhythm. Those acoustic dead spots teach where your voice vanishes, places you need silence more than speech. Microdrones and syringes translate as micro-attentions and small acts of repair. A boundary reset, a sincere apology. Water sipped before anger hardens. If this weaving of equinox light, purple ink, cedar knocks, and censer hums keeps adding ribs to your internal dome, you're welcome to stay in a circle. Hyatt subscribe, or a shared reflection, becomes another unseen tie rod, easing the span. Night presses its cool palm against lead. Somewhere above the imperial gate mosaic, a flake of gold leaf loosens, trembles, then decides to hold fast. The dome inhales darkness like a vow kept in secret, and waits for the first thin ray to redraw the path.